Good morning. Good morning, dear students. You are listening to the second lecture of for human anatomy. My name is Professor Dmitry Starchik, and I will be your lecture for the next, I hope, 1.5 of years. This lecture, we, as I said, it is the second lecture because the first lecture we put in digital variant, and it is for your access in the Moodle, our special university education system, electronic system, and you can find this first lecture with the name Introduction to Human Anatomy in the Moodle. I hope you all are able to get access to the electronic educational system of our university. And today we begin our anatomical education from skeletal system. I hope you are able to hear me clearly, and as I see your responses, please, as usual, usually I ask student when we have online lecture, put your name, your full name, the first name and second name, and the group number. Okay, thank you. If you hear me clearly, then I am ready to open my presentation and start the lecture. I forgot to give you another information, and in the distance format, in the online format of lecture, we also put the special test what you can find in Moodle, and you have to pass this test just after our lecture is finished, and this will show your presence in the lecture, and it also helps you to improve your knowledge for the material you just listened to. Okay, I open my presentation and start. Today's topic is skeletal systems. This system is a part of support and movement system. This is the first system we begin our education in human anatomy, and then we combine with the bones another organs and another system, but that is the old tradition when human anatomy in systematic principles starts education from skeletal systems. The science of skeletal systems, or all bones in our organism, is called osteology. So osteology is the science which we just get started. The term osteology comes from the words, two words. First one is os, which means bone in Latin language, and another words we use very often is osteon. These words come from Greek. It also means bone. And the second word is logos. Logos, which means science in Greek language. Diseases and injuries of the skeletal systems are treated by traumatologists. This is the doctors who treat fractures, gunshot wounds, industrial and domestic injuries, cancer, and tuberculosis of the bones. So this is a part of medicine which devoted to treat, to cure the diseases of bone diseases. And another specialities which also have problems with the bones is called orthopedists. This is the doctors who repair damages bones with prostheses. This is artificial construction which usually put in or put out of the bones and help people to feel better and move better and serve themselves better. Another doctors also are interested in knowledge of bones, and these doctors are hematologists. They deal with diseases of the bone marrow. This is special tissue which almost every bones consist of. Here the main questions and main issues we are going to talk today in our lecture. We will start from general characteristic of the human skeleton, then we will talk about external shape and internal structure of bones. Another interest is the microscopic structure of the bones, and I will tell you about osteon. This is the functional structural unit of bones. We will discuss which chemical and chemical composition of bones and their physical properties. A couple of words we will devote to the development of bones and special age-related changes in these anatomical structures. And in the end of our lecture, we discuss anomalies or abnormalities in development of the skeletal systems. Let's get started. And first issue we are going to talk about this is the general bone characteristics. As maybe you know that skeleton, the term skeleton, comes from Greek words dried. It means that the only bones when people died, only bones are visible, and this it seems like the whole body was dried, so the name skeleton is the dried body. And the skeleton contains an average of 206 bones, and among them there are 36 unpaired and 85 paired bones. Here you see the all bones, all the skeleton in our body, and maybe you know that some of name of bones, like these bones, we call humerus. This is a part of upper limb. This is the pelvis bones. Here you see the longest bone in our body with the name femur in Latin. It is necessary to know Latin terms because we are doctors, and the language which all doctors use for communication is very often Latin. So you have to know Latin terms. Some of bones are small, like here, one of the smallest bones in our body, in our hand, called pisiform bone. And some of bones are really huge, like femur or pelvis bone, but the total average is total amount of bones, total numbers of bones is 206. It may be 205, it may be 207, because some of bones may be additional bones, but usually this is the true number. And as you see, the mass or weight of bones in our body is about 12% of total body weight. The bones or bony prominence are good landmarks for doctors to understand the location of the bones in the human body. As you see here, some of bones which are marked red, like here or here, it means this part of bones can be palpable, like can be touched, and can be we can to set where these bones are located. And doctors use such objects, such small parts of bones to project in other organs. For example, here you see the ribs, and all ribs can be touched, and we use this location or landmark or bone landmarks to image where another organs are located. For example, here is the this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rib, right rib, and usually we know that this is the upper border of hipper the lean. This is a large organ of digestive system which is located in the upper part of abdominal cavity, and we know the 6th rib is the upper border, but lower border is the costal arch, which is also show us the normal position of liver. I recommend you, I do recommend you to touch when you study the bones. Just try to touch these bones in your body, and you will get knowledge and ideas where these bones are located. It is very useful. What kind of function of skeletal systems we can tell, or we distinguish in the human body? First one is support. Support means that the skeleton serves as the structural framework for the body by supporting soft tissues and providing attachment points for the tendons or most skeletal muscles. It means this is the frame, this is the frame which another organs use as a basic to touch to the bones, and this support all the whole body in a special shape. The second function is protection. The skeleton protects the most important internal organs from injury, from damage. For example, cranial bones protect our brain. Vertebrae or backbones protect the spinal cord, and the rib cage, you know that here in the thoracic cage our heart is located, and this organ also is good protected by ribs and sternum. This is the central bone in our body. The bones can assist in movements. It means that most skeletal muscles attach to bones, and when the muscles contract, they pull on bone to produce movement. And that's why we call skeleton as a passive part of movement or of the organ of the support and movement system. The fourth function is mineral storage and release. What does it mean? Bone tissue stores several minerals, especially such very important mineral as a calcium and phosphorus, which contribute to the strength of bones. On demand, bone releases minerals into the blood to maintain critical minerals balance and to distribute the minerals to other parts of the body. Another function is blood cell production. Within certain bones, a connective tissue inside these bones, which is called red bone marrow, produce red and white blood cells, and this is the main source of the blood cells, and it is very important that this tissue is protected with inside, and it is located and protected because it is very deep in our bones. And the last function for skeletal system is triglyceride storage. It means that some of tissue which is located also inside of the bone cavity, especially long bones, we call yellow bone marrow. There are red bone marrow and yellow bone marrow. In comparison to the red bone marrow, yellow bone marrow consists mainly of adipose cells, which store triglyceride. This is, in other words, this is the fat which we need for keeping and maintain our body in good condition. Maybe you know that the stored triglycerides are a potential chemical energy reserve in our body. Anatomists always like to classify every anatomical objects. So we also have to talk about bones classification. There are two bones classification, and I'd like to give you idea about international bonds classification, which we used since 2003. In this classification, we distinguish long bonds like humerus, radius, ulna, femur, tibia, fibula, and also clavicula. All of these bones have their special cavity inside of their central part. If we cut the bones like this, we make transversal cut, we see inside the cavity, and the bone look like a tube, and the internal cavity we call bone cavity. This is a typical for long bones. Another term we use to describe long bones is tube bones. It means they look like a tube because of this special central cavity. The another group, the second group, is the short bones. Sometimes we call them spongy bones, because if we cut these bones, like for example bones like a body of vertebra, like if we cut here, we see the spongy matter or spongy construction of such bones. That's why they call short or spongy. The third group is flat bones. Flat bones means that they look plain. For example, this is the sternum. This is the central part. It is also ribs, because they are flat, and most numbers of cranial or skull bones is also flat bones. Pneumatized bones means that this is a fourth group. It means that inside such bones we could find cavity with the air. Pneumat means in Greek air. So these bones consist air inside. Usually such bones we could find in the skull. For example, the largest pneumatized bones is the maxilla, which consists the large, huge cavity inside, which called hymor sinus or maxillar sinus, and this is a real cavity which consists air. Some of the bones we call irregular bones. Number 5. Irregular bones have properties, have features of different bones. For example, vertebra, that is a typical irregular bones, which has processes, and they look like flat bones, but the body of vertebra is a typical spongy bones. So we call such bones irregular which have different features. And the last group of bones, this is the sesamoid bones. Sesamoid bones, like the largest sesamoid bones in the knee region called patella, you see it here, and these bones in their development they come from the tendons, and usually sesamoid bones means that the bone was developed inside of tendon, inside of part of muscles, and such bones we call sesamoid. So there are six group of bones, and that is international classification of human bones. Okay, see please the examples of the long bones. Here is the humerus, radius, ulna, as well as the metacarpal bones and phalanx. This is the long bone because their length is usually is longer than their transversal size, and such bones we call long bones. And also we could find long bones in the lower limb, like femur bones, tibia, fibula, metatarsal bones in the foot, and also phalanx in our pets. Spongy bones or short bones are found in parts of skeleton where considerable mobility of bones is combined with a great mechanical durability. That is, of course, carpal bones or tarsal bones, like one of the largest spongy or short bones called calcaneus, which means the posterior bone of the pes, of the foot. Flat bones forms walls of cavities and perform a protective function. That is, of course, bones of skull. Mostly all skull bones are flat bones. That is also ribs, scapula, sternum, and pelvis bones as well. Pneumatized bones or pneumatic bones contain cavities lined with the mucosa. It is a special layer, and all pneumatic bones are filled with air. This group includes some bones of the skull. Mostly this is the skull bones, like frontal bones. You see here cavity in the frontal bones or frontal sinus. Also, the very light and fragile bones in the centrum of skull called ethmoidal bones. You see it here, and this is the small cavities, small bullous or small sinuses inside of ethmoidal bones, and that's why we call these bones pneumatized or pneumatic bones. Maybe you know that such bones not only make bones main bones with a light weight, but also they act as voice resonators. They help to hear our voice, not like this, but like typical sounds we speak and we think because of such cavities in the skull bones. Irregular bones, this is vertebra, and also sphenoid bones, because the corpus of sphenoid bones looks like short bones or spongy bones. The wings, this bone has large or major wings and small wings, and this is a flat bones. The wings look like flat bones, but also inside of body sphenoid bones we can find cavity, which is a sinus or empty structure, which give us the possibility to call these bones as irregular bones. And sesamoid bones, as I told you, lie within some tendons. These bones act as blocks, increasing the angle of attachment of tendons to bones, thus optimizing the force of muscle contraction. So usually such bones like pisiform bones and patella, they were developed inside of tendons of muscles, and they help muscles to work. Let's say so. Next issue is the bone chemical composition. As you see from this slide, from this picture, the chemical composition of live bones, which is in our body right now, and the chemical composition of dried bones, which usually use dried bones to study anatomy, and these compositions are different. First of all, the live bones consist in 50% of water. Then there is also a fat inside of bones, and we find organic composition like a protein and carbohydrates, which usually which are about 12.5%, but twice more we could find inorganic substances like calcium phosphate, and usually these chemicals is about 21.8%. In dried bones, the relation between organic matters and inorganic substances is also has twice difference. 35% organic substances and 65 inorganic ones. As you see from this picture, when we remove the inorganic substances, it is possible to make bones flexible and elastic, and the fibula can be deformed, as you see here, and even we can make knock from these bones. But inorganic substances provide hardness and strength for bones. So combination organic and inorganic substances make bones hard, strength, a little bit flexible and elastic. So it is very necessary such special chemical composition of bones. Microscopic structure of bones. If we take, for example, humerus, and we call the central part of these bones, I mean this central part, diaphysis, which means corpus. The ends of bones we called epiphysis, and we distinguish proximal epiphysis and distal epiphysis. Proximal epiphysis, like this part, or caput humerus, is located close to the body. It means proximal. Every structure located more proximal, more central, more close to the whole body, to the centrum of body, we call proximal part. But the opposite is the distal epiphysis, which means that end of bones is located far or in more distance to the centrum of body. So proximal epiphysis and distal epiphysis, usually this is this part every long bones have. And the narrow part between epiphysis and diaphysis we call metaphysis. Metaphysis is the bone region where special special cartilago located, and this is usually this is the region between the diaphysis and epiphysis. All long bones have got a medullary cavity inside. This is visible. So this is a cavity, and when we cut bones, we see the structure looks like a tube. Inside of a medullary cavity, we find yellow bone marrows in adult, but in childhood we find here red bone marrow, which transform in yellow marrow when people get older. The spongy substance looks like here. This is a typical spongy substance, and this usually typical for short bones, but also spongy bones we can find in long bones as well. And the very hard, let's do this, very hard structure here, usually in the diaphysis of long bones, called compact bones. This is a very hard substances and very strange substances in comparison with the spongy bones. We see few articular cartilage on the surface of the bones, and usually this structure is a part of joints which bones combines when bones put together, and this is a special part of support and movement systems. We will study it in our next lecture. And this is a special surface on the bones which are very not flat, but they are smooth and used for movement. Articular cartilage. Next part of the bones is the periosteum. Periosteum is usually this is the this is the connective tissue which is located around all other part of the bones except of articular cartilage, and periosteum serves as the source for blood vessels. You see here blood vessels, arteries and veins, which come to the bones in periosteum. So this is a special layer containing blood vessels. Inside of the medullary cavity we find endosteum. This is also connective tissue which covers medullary cavity from inside. Red bone marrow and yellow bone marrow, usually red bone marrow located in the spongy substance, but inside of medullary cavity usually we find yellow bone marrow. Red bone marrow produce blood cells. Yellow bone marrow doesn't produce anything. It is just a store for fat in our body. Here you see special construction of the flat bones or skull bones tissue, which call diploia. Here you see two layers, two plates of compact bone tissue, and between them we find a little bit small, not thick but thin, spongy spongy substances, which also consist of the red bone marrow, and this is a diploia, another name. This is a diploia. Here you see articular cartilage located on the femur, here on the patella, and as well on the superior surface of the tibia. The articular cartilage is a thin layer of hyaline cartilage covering the part of the epiphysis. Usually only epiphyses are covered with the articular cartilage, and such bones with the articular cartilage forms an articulation or joints with another bone, as you see here. Between femur and between tibia we see the knee joint. Periosteum. The periosteum is a tough connective tissue sheath and or covers or layer, and it has associated blood supply that surround the bone surface wherever it is not covered by articular cartilage. As you see, periosteum, inside of periosteum we find the blood vessels which support bones with the blood. And endosteum is the thin membrane that lines the medullary cavity inside of long bones. Microscopic structure of bones are visible when we take small enlargement, and we take small microscope and see details inside of compact bones. Typically, compact bones, also referred to as cortical or dense bones, is the type of bone tissue absorbed at the surface of a bone, but it also can extend deeper into the bone tissue. Here you see compact bone. Here is the part of long bones, is the compact bones, and we take a part of the compact bones and see it in imagination, we find such circular structures inside, and compact bone is quite porous with an abundance of microscopic spaces and canals. So we find a lot of canals inside of compact bones, and these canals have blood vessels inside. You see, this is a small canal, and this cavity is used for coming blood vessels. Usually such canals has concentric lamella, and between them we find typical cells located in the bones, and we call these cells osteocyte. These cells usually help bones to maintain osteons, maintain bone tissue, and they need blood, and such blood supplying they come from the internal small arteries and veins coming in the centrum of osteons. In other words, we use for describing compact bone tissue unit, we call it Haversan system. Haversan systems is the another name of osteons, but this is the this is named osteon, and Haversian system is a structural unit of compact bone. Here also visible Haversian system in different histological specimens, like electronic micrograph, or here visible compact structure bone with this central canal and lamella, concentric lamella, and with the dark objects. This is the osteons, or cells of the bone tissue. Here, if we take the structure of spongy bones, we find such in contrast to compact bone tissue, spongy bone tissue, also referred to as the trabecular or cancellous bone tissue, doesn't contain osteons. Spongy bone tissue is always located in the inferior of a bone, protected by a covering of compact bones. So usually spongy bone tissue is located close to the compact bone. Spongy bone tissue consists of lamella that are arranged in an irregular pattern of thin columns. You see these columns here, called trabeculae. So these columns we call trabeculae, and between the trabecula are spaces. Here you see large spaces, which are large gaps, and these gaps or spaces are visible, and all of these macroscopic spaces are filled with the red bone marrow in bones that produce blood cells. Sometimes in these spaces here may be located yellow bone marrow, but usually that is red bone marrow. And typically each trabecula, which you can see here, each trabecula consists of concentric lamellas. Here is the lamellas, concentric lamellas, which consist between them osteocytes and small canalicules here, which radiate outward from the lacunas. Osteocytes lies in lacunas, but lacunas connect with the other lacunas or the surface of trabecula with the canaliculus. Typically, such trabecula form special lines inside of spongy substance. As you see here in the corpus of vertebra, visible that this is a special form of lines which protect and make our bones strength, and such trabecular lines to protect us, to protect our bones from to be soft, and they form the strength of our bones. Here also visible the trabecular lines inside of calcaneus bone in the foot. It is also visible they located in the vectors of the force. These bones these bone fields. Couple of words about bone cells. First of all, there are two sources of bone cells, and the adult cells in compact bones and trabeculas is the osteocytes. It comes from the osteoblasts, which usually form bone extracellular matrix and produce the bones. Because only osteoblasts can produce the bone extracellular matrix, osteocytes osteocytes don't have a possibility to produce the matrix. They only maintains bone tissue, but all these bones, I mean osteoblasts and osteocytes, come from osteoprogenitor cells, which is small cells, like a mother from the osteoblast, and then osteoblast can transform in the osteocytes. Another group of cells located in bone tissue we call osteoclasts. As you see, osteoclast is cells with multi-nuclear structures. Inside of such cells we can find a few nucleus. So this is a polynucleus or multi-nucleus cells, and these cells function as bone breakdowners, which means they destroy bone extracellular matrix, and this function is opposite to the osteoblast function. Osteoblasts form bone extracellular matrix, but osteoclasts destroy it. And here visible the function description of all function for bone cells. Location of the bone cells. Usually osteoclasts located from inner side, here, as visible here. They destroy layers of bone, but osteoblasts located usually under periosteum here, and they produce new and new layers, and that's why the bones grows. But osteocytes located between lamellas or between circular plates in osteons. Here is the development. The osteocytes and osteoblasts, they come from osteogenic cells. All of these osteoblasts is a form of the osteocytes, but this younger osteocytes, adult osteocytes looks like these cells, but osteoblasts is younger osteocytes which produce bone matrix. And here is the process development of the osteoclasts, which is produced from different stem cells, and usually this is the bone destroyer cells. Few disorders of the skeletons we could find in the clinic. I hope that is not I don't have enough time to explain it. Most of them is a problem in development. A problem is genetic materials, and like Marfan syndromes. These people have very long, extremely long bones, or for example, achondroplasia is a result of abnormal epiphyseal activity. Usually, the body is looks like a adult, but the arm and leg are short in such diseases. Bone formation. Bone formation is this process by when bones forms and called this process also is called ossification. You may hear another term for not only ossification but also osteogenesis, which means bone formation. Bone formation occurs in four principal situations. The initial formation of bones in embryo and fetus, and the growth of bones during infancy and childhood, or adolescence until the adult size are reached. We may see the bone formation during remodeling of bones. Replacement, it means replacement of old bones by new bone tissue throughout life. And also the repairing of fractures, in other words, breaks in bones. We also see the process of bone formation. We will discuss the first three situations in this section. This is the fractures and expanded and we discuss today the initial formation of bones in embryo and growth of bones and remodeling of bones during throughout life. And fracture we will discuss later. Method of bone formation is two-way how bone are development. Intermembranous ossification we call also the direct process. It has only two stages. Bones, such bones forms directly within the condensed mesenchyme. Condensed mesenchyme, this is the tissue. Tissue is the part of embryon. And in chondral ossification, we call it indirect ossification or indirect process, which has three stages. There are three stages in chondral ossification process. Such bone forms hyaline cartilage from mesenchyme. So the first stage is mesenchyme, then the second is hyaline cartilage, and then from hyaline cartilage is formed the typical bone tissue. You see here intermembranosis process of ossification. Usually we see such development in flat bones of skull. And inside of mesenchyme model started the islands, small islands or small points of ossification. We call them ossification center. And mesenchyme or connective tissue around it. Such islands grows and then form typical structures of the flat bones. Я перезвоню, Катерина Владимировна, хорошо. Enchondral ossification means that in mesenchymal cells develop into the chondroblasts and form cartilage model. Here visible the typical cartilage model of the long bones with diaphysis. It is a cartilage and epiphysis and proximal and distal epiphysis are also made from cartilage. Inside of cartilage started process ossification. It may come as a peripheral ossification in the corpus of long bones, but also we find the ossification center inside of epiphysis, and between this center and diaphysis forms epiphyseal plate. It is a special cartilage plate which help bones to grow. How long bones grow? That is during infancy, childhood, and adolescence, bones throughout the body grows in thickness by oppositional growth, and long bones lengthen by interstitial growth. Oppositional growth means that the bone tissue forms from the outside, but interstitial growth, this is forming of secondary ossification center inside of cartilage model of the epiphysis. We find ossification center in both epiphysis, in proximal and distal epiphysis, and that is the process called interstitial growth. And the main the important structure or important substance which help us to grow in length is the cartilage located between the corpus of bones and epiphysis. If you see such growth zones in the long bones, if these lines epiphyseal cartilage will destroy it, it means that bones will not grow in the length, because this is the main structure which helps bones to growth in length. This process come as you see. First, the layer of osteoblast form another plates, and the blood vessels isolated with the bone tissue and transform in the osteon. Such typical shape of osteons forms thanking by the development cells or osteoblasts, and the osteoblast forming the new layers, more and more layers around the cavity, but osteoclasts damage the bone matrix and make the bone cavity large, like in adult. A couple of words of clinical anatomy of the skeletal system. And here you see process which called osteoporosis, which means pore passageway and osseous condition. Literally, a condition of porous bones affects about 3% people a year. In addition, 5% people have low bone mass, or in other words, osteopenia, which put them at risk for osteoporosis. So it is not these numbers, people which have osteoporosis and osteopenia, it means that a lot of people when they get older have such problems with the bones. The basic problem of the osteoporosis is that bone resorption or breakdown outspaces bone deposition formation. Like you see here, this is a normal bone, but inside of osteoporotic bones we find such spaces, and because of these spaces there is no calcium, and it makes bones fragile. It is very easy to injure, to break our bones when they have osteoporosis. You see that this is osteoporosis with old process in vertebrae, and it makes vertebra it makes it corpus thin and pressed. Because of such process, the people get curved back and have to use special help to move. Here is also visible X-ray diagnostic of osteoporotic old woman, 88-year woman. We see osteoporotic bone tissue in corpus vertebra. Fractures. There are different type of fractures of bones. The heaviest is the open fractures, and as you see here, in the open fractures, the part of breaked bones come out and visible in the skin. It break the skin. The closed fracture does not break the skin. So that's why open fractures is more difficult, more hard process. Comminuted fracture means that it forms some pieces of bones around the break fissure. And green stick fracture means that the bones doesn't break totally, and this is a partial fracture in which one side of the bone is broken and the other side bends, similar to the way a green twig breaks on one side while the other side stays whole but bends. Usually such green stick fractures we see they occur only in children whose bones are not fully ossificate and contains more organic materials than inorganic materials. Impacted fracture, one end of the fractured bones is forcefully driven into the inferior of the other, and the dislocated fracture of the distal end of the lateral leg bones, fibula, like you see here, is serious injury of the distal tibial articulation. And some of bones has a typical zone for fractures, and we call such fracture in typical place. And another fracture. And here you see the process of repairing bones after fracture. Usually it takes time when form bone, spongy bone trabecula and named bony callus. This is a new generated bone, which usually which is thicker than typical size, but in the end the remodeling, and we couldn't we would even couldn't see the place of the fracture. Okay. Here I have no time to explain you skeletal development, but I just only say that we distinguish three stages of skeletal development. First one is the membranosus stage. That all in this stage all bones consist of connective tissue, mesenchyme. Here visible the mesenchyme in the embryo. Then the second stage is cartilaginous stage, It starts from 6 weeks, and usually in this period of time a lot of bones are consist from cartilaginous tissue, and it is visible even in the children. And the second, in the end, the finish stage is bone stage, which ends at 25-26 years, when all cartilages transform into the bone tissue. And this is visible cartilaginous visible in the embryons in different periods and fetus. Have no time to explain the abnormalities. I hope your teacher will tell you more about abnormalities in bones. That's all for now, my friend. I'd like to remember you that you have to take a test in the Moodle today, and I am waiting your questions. Picture is not clear. Unfortunately, I could not see your question because I have presentation in the whole screen, and please send your questions now. You asked me send this PDF lecture. It is not possible because PDF is I can't send. I could put it in Moodle, but you have in Moodle the link for this lecture, and you are able to hear this lecture again if something is not you were not in time, or you didn't understand. You just can to repeat this lecture and hear it again. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope we meet next Tuesday, next lecture, and it is also be the online lecture. And if you have new questions, put it to the forum. I just also that is also visible in the Moodle. Okay, that's all for now. Let me say your goodbye, and I hope to see you again very first.